Welcome to Spirit Club, a podcast and community where we talk about what's really running the show, your inner world. I'm Angel, your host, your guide, and your spiritual bestie. Around here, we're all about doing the inner work because your outer reality is only ever a reflection of what's going on within. We practice radical ownership, freedom in faith, surrendering our path to God, and trusting our intuition like our lives depend on it. Because honestly, they do. So take a breath, open your heart, and let's dive in. Hello, Spirit Club. Welcome to another guest episode. Today's guest is a somatic practitioner and psychedelic microdosing guide, Leslie Drafin, who teaches nervous system regulation through both somatic science and feminine ritual. We love this combo over here. Her work mainly supports high-achieving spiritual women who are living in survival mode. I feel like this sounds like most of this audience, so everyone's ears perking up. So really excited to get to know your work, your medicine, and you. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Okay. So we're going to start with some icebreaker. If you know your sun, moon, and rising.
I sure do. And I know we have the same sun, Taurus sun,
I feel that.
Libra moon, Leo rising.
Ah, amazing. Libra moon. I find Libras to be so, I don't know, safe, balancing. I really love Libras. Anyway, what part of your big three do you resonate with?
That's funny because I was like, I actually don't resonate with Libra as much as I resonate with Leo rising and Taurus sun because of my past in TV, the work I do now, Leo rising tracks, Taurus sun, body-based work, being very in my sanctuary, tracks as well.
Grounded, yeah. And I almost feel lion energy just sitting right here. I've known you for about 5 minutes, so I feel that, Leo. And I really can't wait to hear about this past in as a news anchor. But before I get there, one more question. So this podcast, we're all about doing the inner work to change our lives. And so would love to go there with you right now. What inner work is alive for you in your life right now?
So for me, the current inner work is actually going into rewiring beliefs, rewiring identity. I've been in the birth canal for a while. I see the entrance. I'm in the final squeeze. And now it seems as if those old programs are what's remaining to finally be reworked through really dedicated daily practices and really trying to just return to myself and my gifts. And it's funny because this is where I started on my spiritual journey in 2018. And I went back down into the body, descended. Now I'm in the ascension phase, I think.
And as I think you brought to light something really important. As you're about to come out of the birth canal, I feel like some of these get louder. Some of these blocks get louder. These fears get louder. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, for sure. There's that part that's like, hey, you should stay small. You should stay here. It's safe here. I know it's squeezy and you don't really feel like you're living your light, but like, isn't it warm?
Yeah. No one will know. You can just stay here. Just stay
here. Stay here. And it's funny because I think for the last 4 years I've had my business. All of those little niggling thoughts that are like gnawing on the brain have been present. And it's something about this past few weeks. I mean, I'm talking about this is a very recent 2 to 3 week situation. And probably it has something to do with the astrology. But this shift in like, okay, are you ready to do the thing or just keep talking about the thing? And we're in this phase of like, all right, it's time. It's finally time.
Yeah, time to bring my Taurus self forward and ground it into reality. I feel you. I literally was just writing an article about that particular feeling, so I'm with you. And I was just writing about how I think maybe a former version of me would want to like make that voice go away, suppress, all that sort of thing. And I've come over having to do brave things over and over.
Mhm.
I've come to realize she comes up. She comes up every time that there's a ceiling or a step out of the comfort zone or whatever it is. And so suppressing her is pointless, and probably making it worse. And now it's really just about like acknowledging her, chatting with her. Just, I
Mhm.
don't let her take the wheel. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. We've had
Yeah.
a lot of chats, me and her.
Yeah. We're getting to know each other.
For
Less.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Um, and so you alluded to this whole journey starting back in 2018. So I would
Mhm.
love to hear, how did you get into this work? Where did you come from? How are you here today?
Yeah, for sure. So I had my spiritual awakening in 2018, at the end of the year and then in the beginning of 19. And I think for me, it was really about deconstructing from my religious upbringing. My father is a preacher. I was adopted into that family. That's a whole side story, which I'm happy to go into. But I had lived for so many years as this successful news anchor who looked great on paper and deeply disconnected and unhappy inside. And so I turned to many different coping mechanisms in my 20s and early 30s, drinking alcohol, eating disorders, abusing Adderall. And so when I started to feel, more interested in the spiritual world, the gateway drugs of spirituality, tarot,
Hmm.
astrology, crystals, all of those fabulous things that pull us into the deeper work. That was in 2018 and 19. And at that point, I was still a news anchor. I was still living sort of these two lives, which I didn't at that point understand really how that manifested.
Hmm.
But in 19, I, thank goodness, had really started a deep morning practice, and it looked like meditation, and I got trained to be a meditation teacher that year, and it looked like somatic movement, and that held me really well and set me up really well for when COVID hit, because my crash out moment was certainly being the essential anchor during the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember back when we saw all the news anchors like anchoring from their home? That was never me. I was the one who was dependable. I was the one they could trust. So I was the one who had to go in. And what that looked like is not only was I doing the normal work of being the main anchor and the executive producer, but then I was taking calls. I was interacting with people who were panicking on the phone, mostly senior citizens, and unbeknownst to myself, really absorbing a lot more stress and a lot more trauma without any tools to succeed in dissipating those things. And so 2020, 2021 was certainly the year the light went out in my eyes. My husband really could see it by November of 21. 22 rolls around, I get sick for multiple months, thought it was COVID. It was not. It was some weird respiratory issue that affected my throat, my voice.
Mm.
And I started to eat psychedelic mushrooms. And
I
that was the catalyst for me leaving television, stepping more fully into my work. I had been training in the year previous to be a menstrual cycle coach, and that sort of evolved in many ways into the womb-led somatic healing, so psychedelic work that I do now. So that's sort of the roundabout way we got here.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. I want to go back to, you were saying I was successful on paper, but I was deeply unfulfilled. What was the feeling? Like, was it like a call to more? Like, what was the
Mm.
unfulfilled feeling?
In the beginning, when I wasn't conscious about the feeling, it was, I can't sit with myself. I don't love myself. It was, in my 20s, shame was such a big part of my life. I got herpes at age 18 from my first sexual encounter. And that really spiraled me into this perfectionism that I already had. But I think that shame made it worse because I felt as if I proved I was successful and I achieved the highest I could possibly go for, then of course someone would love me. And
Mm.
so I was at odds with myself. I was in a really bad marriage, and the 20s were very much about disassociation. And then when I got divorced and then met my current husband, um, my 30s came around and I started to sort of wake up to certain things like how alcohol wasn't serving me and how I didn't want to be starving myself anymore. And then the 30-year-old version and beyond version of me again, successful on paper, but anxious at night, waking up with
Mm.
this feeling of dread, living in a constant state of flight. And television is a crazy beast because every single day there are multiple deadlines you have to hit. And I was just always in a state of chronic flight. Hustle, achieve, do, never even settle, because I'd anchor the 5 o'clock news, be there till 5:30, have 30 minutes to prep for the 6 o'clock news, and then have again at 10. And so it was just this constant state of a fluttering chest, a just a heightened prickliness all over the body that felt like something was going to get me. Something
Mhm.
was coming, something was coming, something was coming. And I didn't understand somatic trauma work. I didn't understand that at that point. But thinking back to how the body remembers, even she remembers now. She's like, we hated that. Um, what was typical was like all weekend I would just crash, or I would numb out with the drug of choice for me at that point, which was still wine and alcohol. And so that's sort of how it started to manifest: deep anxiety, deep panic, deep dissociation,
Mhm.
and this feeling in the end. And I remember it specifically. October 21, we had a Halloween costume party at work, and I dressed up as a witch. And I remember, and I had like crazy makeup, like very Vikingish makeup. And I remember having to take that off to put my TV makeup on. And I had this realization in the makeup room where, wait a second, this is actually the costume. Being the news anchor is actually the costume, the mask. And I'm like, oh gosh. And it was like 6 months
Epiphany.
later, I
Yeah.
was gone.
Incredible. What
Mm-hmm.
a message. And
Mm-hmm.
so, when you started to, dabble into tarot, astrology, all these things were like sort of pulling you forward as you led up to leaving your career.
Mm-hmm.
What was pulling you towards those things? Were you like, was it a call of the heart? Was it curiosity? Was it needing to escape? Like what was pulling you in those directions?
I think now that you asked this question, because no one's ever asked this, I think looking back, what it likely was the seeking for God, source.
Mhm.
I speak to her and the feminine goddess.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
especially growing up as the preacher's daughter in the South of the United States, Father God, figurehead of three male deities, Holy Spirit, not super gendered, but this idea that women are not equal in, even though some folks argue that we would be equal. I think that was sort of maybe what I was looking for, is this connection to something bigger than myself, and a way to get back to God. And that took a long time, even in my spiritual path. So seeking something else, seeking something bigger, the ability to trust something outside of myself, because what the shame spiral around herpes did was completely isolate me. My family was as accepting as they could be, but in 2004, we didn't talk about this. We barely
Mhm.
talk about it now.
Barely, yeah.
And I was away at college for the first time. I was alone, and I just self-isolated, and I built this wall around myself. And the walling off of Leslie is a very interesting theme that was crumbled, I think, finally by psychedelics. So I think that's sort of why initially I was looking into those things. And I've got ADHD. So it was so exciting. It was like a new
Yeah.
hobby in the beginning, like a pretty shiny
The
hobby.
rabbit holes are
Yep.
endless.
And
Yeah.
it was straight down that rabbit hole. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my goddess, look at all these interesting things." And I was learning so much, and feeling a lot better, because while I think that spirituality can certainly be a bypassing tool, and it was for me at times in the beginning, it did make me feel better.
Right. It gave you hope, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
based
Mm-hmm.
on where you were. Okay, so then now we're really sick, and then you meet mushrooms. How did
Mm-hmm.
that come to be, and how was that first experience?
So I first heard about mushrooms from my news director at work, because I did this weekly series called Your Best Life. And I don't know where he had heard about it, but he was like, "Well, you should do a story." And I did a quick Google, and I was like, "Well, how am I going to do a story? They're illegal." And that was it. That was all the conversation was. But I love to tell that, because after I left and everything has happened, I love to text him every once in a while. Like when I get a certification, I'm like, "See, you did this, you planted this." But I finally met them after hearing about it on a podcast, and a woman named Bijou Finney, who goes by Mushroom Mamacita. She was speaking on a podcast specifically about how mushrooms assist with sexual trauma. And I heard her on that show, immediately invited her to my show. And the second I hung up the call with her, was like, I must hire you. And so I'm still in the thick of television news, Leslie, and microdosing psychedelics on the side. And it's funny because if you read about Ram Dass and Timothy Leary, some of the heavy hitters in the early psychedelic movements, it wasn't too long after they met these entheogens that help you see into your deep self that their whole lives were pivoted, right? And that's certainly typical of my story. 4 months, I think, after I began my journey with psychedelic medicine, I took a sabbatical for my mental health and never went back to TV.
And
So
so
it's
was it
interesting.
clarity? Was it strength? Was it
It was a
like
complete,
open mind?
it was not. It was a complete breaking down of the facade. Like I said, I had this wall around my heart probably since before birth. Let's be honest. People who are adopted, of course, have this abandonment wound, and I'm sure I had built that up around myself, so I didn't get hurt. But I picked a job that almost required a certain amount of separation because of the terrible things I was having to report on daily. So the way I describe mushrooms is I had this wall around my heart, and they came up like those invasive vines. In the South, it's called kudzu. So came up like kudzu and just crumbled it. So I literally had several breakdown moments. And one of the last was we had this horrible school shooting about 2 hours from where I live, where 19 elementary school babies were killed and their two teachers. So 21 people were murdered. I was anchoring by myself. My co-anchor had to fill in on the morning show that week, and I remember just crying in the middle of the A block, the first part of the news. And I finally get to the commercial break, and my producer's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I'm not okay. This is not okay. Why are we doing this? This is tragedy porn. Like, what is happening?" And a week later, I finally was like, I gotta go. Now, I had already been talking to my therapist about this idea of taking a sabbatical. I had talked to my psychiatrist. And it's important for you guys to hear that too, because I was in the Western medical model and it wasn't serving me nearly as deeply as the psychedelic medicine did. So it wasn't strength, it wasn't courage. It was, oh man, you cannot hold this together anymore. I had this feeling like if I didn't take a break, I would get on TV and say something crazy and like ruin
Right.
everything. Like, okay, we have to just take a pause. And the 3 months I was off on short-term disability were incredibly painful. Oh, it was painful. And the end of that whole career was, I'm 97% sure I'm not going to go back. I already had my podcast where I talked about a lot of taboo things. And I get an email a week before I'm supposed to return saying, well, we're not going to renew your contract in 2 months, but like you can come back to work. And I was like, nah, good. Thank you, universe, for just taking that from me. Because I
Don't
think I would
dangle a
have
carrot.
been, yeah, I would have been caught in this will she, won't she, did I do the right thing? Even though it was 97% a solid don't go back for me. But then she came in and was like, it's okay, baby. If you can't decide on yourself, I'll just take it from
Here's a
you.
sign for
Here
you.
you go. Go
Yeah, yeah.
ahead. It was right. So that's sort of how that happened.
Okay, so here's an important question, I think really important in the world we're living in now. With the walls coming down from around your heart, do you have any ways that you are able to, how do I say this, know tragedy, know what's going on in the world, and keep your heart open? Like, because I think this is something many, especially big feelers, are struggling with today, and they're suffering because they feel it so strongly, but they don't really have any tools beyond that, and so they're suffering.
I think that's such a good question because in the beginning, after I left TV, I never watched TV and I still don't watch the news. And I wasn't on TikTok until like last year, and that was for promoting my own business. And so, what I'll say is completely ignoring what's happening in the world won't necessarily make you feel better, but it will just make you feel a little bit more blind when you finally do figure out all the things that are happening in the world. And so, to your question, I think for me, the shift method, which is a 9-minute somatic practice that I created after my soulmate dog died, is certainly the practice that I use to keep my heart open. It's 2 minutes of journaling where you're looking for sensations in the body, you're honoring whatever's coming up without judgment, and you're just bullet pointing it, right? Just super quick. which helps you stay in the body and the feeling of it versus in the talking mind of sorting out all the messages. And then it's 3 minutes of breath and 4 minutes of movement. And so that, like I said, was created after Gunnar passed away, who was my Great Dane, my soulmate, who once he passed away in 24, I started having panic attacks again. I was like, what is happening? And I knew I'd been sober for a while, fully sober. I knew I was not going to go back and work with medicine, psychedelics at that point, because the trauma from losing him and the grief from losing him was too big. And so that's how Shift was born. It's meant to be a daily practice that assists you in dropping from head into mind, into heart, into womb, and really starting to create a better connection and more importantly, communication system between the things your body is trying to tell you and the words your mind wants to put to those sensations.
Amazing. And so this is what helped you to heal or to process what was like your response to Gunnar, may he rest in peace, passing. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I left the vet with my husband and I had been sober at that point for, my last drink was on Christmas of 22. So a year and a half, I think I was sober at that point. And I remember leaving the vet, also interesting. When I left the vet, it was 444 on the clock, which is an angel number that's like, you're divinely protected. I'm like, of course I am, because now he's my spirit team. So I remember turning to my husband and saying, there is a part of me that wants you to drive straight to the liquor store and get a big old bottle of wine. And I just want to get obliterated. And I'm like, and I'm aware enough that that is a very small part of me. And she's here and present, and but we're not doing it. And I came up with Shift probably a week later. And it's typical of me as someone who is a type A perfectionist, loves to be a little busy bee to avoid feeling, to try to create something as well as heal at the same time. And it's like, well, good, because that actually has come to help thousands, I think, people. It's been downloaded, I think, 1,800 times at this point. I give it away for free. And it's just such a lovely little anchor for us ADHD girlies who need, the masculine structure of a timed playlist where it's the first song is this, the second song is this, the third song is this, and you're done. With the feminine, intuitive ability to flow as you go. And so I'm grateful that that was born from his passing. And I know it was, I'm sure, a download from him across the way.
100% a gift. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's something that we can link and send people to?
Oh, yeah,
try?
for sure. Yes, please do.
Amazing. Thank you. What a gift. Okay. So let's get into your work. Your work is essentially using the tools that you used for yourself on the type of people that you like come from the same background that you came from, as we do, right?
Yep. 100%.
And these women, I'm guessing mostly women that you work with, are high achievers, super busy, doing a lot, but have this, deeper sense of self and connection. That's a lot of the women that listen to this podcast. So, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, why is this so common amongst women, in your opinion? What do you think?
Oh my goodness, we're about to go so hard into the patriarchy. I think it's because women have been conditioned from birth to live in a world that's meant for male bodies, not female bodies. And so what happens is when we override our own internal system, our survival mechanisms, our survival states get activated and stay activated for longer. And so when I see high achieving women, I also see them in constant states of flight, which, like we've talked about, is always checking your emails, always having your phone on, always feeling like you need to be the best at work, raising your hand first, feeling like in your marriage, you're not only the house manager, but you're also his emotional support person if you're in a heterosexual relationship. Plus you've got kids, their mom, and all the other little roles that go with that. And so the world celebrates your success. The world celebrates your productivity and your ambition. And underneath all of that is a survival state that says, if I don't do everything right, no one will love me. I will be abandoned. I will be left out. And so what I also see typical in these high functioning women is going at 150% Monday to Friday in the negatives on the weekends. And then they're like, well, see, something is wrong with me. I'm terrible at keeping up with what I say I'm going to do. Or in the quiet moments, they start to really question, like, am I broken? Is something wrong with my life? Am I in the wrong life? And in reality, you might be in the right life, but being the wrong version of yourself. And so once you can start to see the roots of where did this come from? Whose story is this? How have I had to protect myself to survive in the world that is around me? I think that starts to soften, I hope at least, it starts to soften this pointing of the finger back at self, which we often do. Because when we're highly capable and super intelligent and self-aware, we think we can solve everything up here. And when you're staying in your head, you start to point the finger at yourself more and more and more. And so the body-based work that I really focus most on forces a quieting, forces a softening. And I say forces because you want to talk about resistance. Good gracious. The high functioning girlies out there are some of the most resistant to getting help and some of the most resistant to softening. And they're the easiest to work with once they decide that they want it. So it's like, I always say, you're the worst until you're the best. Because at that point, it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. It's like,
I can chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about how, there's an obvious rise in the feminine these past few years. And I have seen in my clients, in my community, in this community, a general tend towards, like, there's a call in women's hearts to slow down, to find a different rhythm, to find a different pace. So what a timely time for your work to come in. So what are some of the things that you do to support a woman like this?
Yeah. So one of the first things we do is practice shift. That is a daily practice I give all the clients that I have, or if they're in my membership, that's what they're recommended to do. It's obviously never a requirement. But that brings you back into learning the sensation of the body. Because as I said, when we are highly functioning, intelligent women, we are very good at talking about all of things. We can see our patterns. We can discuss our patterns at length. And the second that we're asked to tap into body, and this is again from my personal experience, it's all gray. It's like, well, I don't know. And they'll even, folks that I've worked with will even start to identify a sensation in the body, not as a sensation, just this is anxiety. This is this. And so it's really about getting to understand this unique language that your body speaks to you. And so somatic work is the foundation. And once we create some nervous system stabilization through returning to the roots, and that could mean to the root of the sensation, to the root of the wound. If you understand what that root wound might be, we might then start to do a little excavation, a little self-archaeology of whose thought was that? Where did we learn that? Then it comes back to the womb, right? As I said, my first iteration of the coaching world was as a menstrual cycle coach. And that's, I think, very potent because of the trauma of my birth mother, who was a child when I was born and was molested. And that's why I was born, through my own disconnection from my female self, being a preacher's daughter raised in deep purity culture, and then the herpes. So the womb has been the caller, the great mother calling me home, probably for multiple timelines. And so then with the women that I work with, it's okay. Once we return to the body, we return more deeply into the wound and to the womb itself. So that can look like really starting to embody different practices, moving with your cycle, moving with the moon if you don't have a uterus anymore, moving with the pace of the womb, which is cyclical itself, understanding how the female nervous system is directly linked to your womb and your menstrual cycle. Then it's about continuing to soften and soften and soften more. And finally, from that space, expanding with psychedelic medicine if they're ready. Because for me, what I've learned in trial and error, and that's my human design, to be the experimenter, is when you try to go first with medicine, psychedelic medicine, and you don't have a foundation of stabilized nervous system, your nervous system can freak out. And for me, I think that that may have been a little of what happened in the beginning. And thankfully, I had somebody who was my guide. Um, but if I could go back and do anything differently, I would have flip-flopped. I would have done my deep somatic work first and then added in mushrooms. And so that's what I do now with my clients. And then once we get to that space of opening the subconscious more through psychedelic mushrooms, then we really dive even deeper into our relationship to pleasure, our relationship to the senses and sensuality, to really create what I call this embodied sovereign woman, this person who moves from this place of deepest self-trust. Because when we understand that if we feel whole, even in the becoming, that we will never leave ourselves. We don't have to worry about the abandonment wound. When we love ourselves at our deepest cellular level, we don't have to worry about nobody loving us. And from that space, we become truly unshakable. And in a world where the patriarchy is in its death rattle, that's the women that we have to have rising.
That was a clip right there. You were channeling. That was beautiful. Yes, because you got you. When you get to that place where you got you, makes me want to cry. Okay, thank you. I was thinking about, you were talking about how you'd prefer to do the somatic first and then the mushrooms because of the state of the nervous system.
Yeah.
I'm realizing that there's a lot of talk about nervous system, but there may not be like an awareness for people listening of where the state of their nervous system is. Do you have any, I don't know, signs, indicators that someone might be in flight mode constantly, or the other modes?
Yeah. And I think for me, the way that I like to explain it is thinking about what we call the window of tolerance. And I want to first preface this by saying that as a white woman who's educated and grew up in a very stable home life, my nervous system is privileged beyond compare for some folks. And so if you're someone who is Black or brown, or you've grown up in poverty, your nervous system might not respond like mine does. And so that's kind of a different conversation. And I think it's important that we honor that, because we're also looking at nervous system science that was mostly done by white men on white men. Okay.
Right.
Now, as somebody who deeply honors the earth and the ancient wisdom and has studied with indigenous mentors in the past around specifically psychedelics, what I want to say about understanding your nervous system is looking at what's called the window of tolerance. And this place is this, call it the middle ground, right? You're thinking about 3 layers. The middle is the window where we feel peace, safety, resilient, we're courageous. This is where we're living from our embodied sovereign self. And we don't always live here, and we can't live here. If you're always there, you're probably in a coma, okay? So you're highly medicated. That's for sure.
You are out of touch, probably.
You are not here fully, because your nervous system has to respond to activation and downregulation to get you through your day. So above the window, because I like to think of this sort of in a picture, above the window is where fight flight lives. That's where we get activated up into that state. And so if you think about, this is an example that I think most folks can understand. Think about how you're driving to work and all of a sudden someone pulls out in front of you. What does the body do? Well, you probably, eyes go up bigger, right? To broaden how far you can see. You're probably taking some quick, shallow breaths, and you likely slam on the brake. Okay. Yep. You brace for impact. Okay. And that is zooming you up into activation above your window of tolerance. And that's fight flight right there. So the bracing of that was necessary for you to have a quick reaction and avoid the crash. And so you avoid the crash. You swerve to the side. Everything is fine. You continue on to work. Coming back down into the window of tolerance is what we want. And unfortunately, a lot of folks would stay elevated above that window in the activation state for a while. That's why we might feel angry later that day, why we might feel snappy, why we might feel constantly looking around like something else is going to happen to us. Danger is present. I'm living in this state of constantly looking for it. So that's how it might feel to be above your window. And it can happen in a text from a boss, your husband coming in being huffy, because it's like, oh God, what did I do wrong, right? Or, all kinds of things can activate us into the state of fight flight. Now, what happens when we live there for a really long time is that we become so overburdened by this fight flight that we may collapse down into dissociation, collapse, being below the window of tolerance. And that might look like depression. It might feel like not being able to get out of bed in the morning, have very low motivation. This is where freeze lives and also where fawn lives. And fawn is such a funny little nervous system state that's one of the least studied, but it is present in every high functioning woman that I know, because fawn is your people pleaser. Fawn is wanting to keep the peace. Fawn is the one who says, sure, I can do that project for you by Monday when it's 4:45 on a Friday night and they just gave you that assignment. Okay. So this is, it's a reaction that wants you to be safe because, oh, well, if I don't say yes, then what if this happens and this happens? What's it mean about me? To not say yes. And so you can get to those states of collapse from deep chronic fight flight, and also you can get there from grief. When Gunnar died, I was in collapse. When I left my job and I lost that identity of who I had wanted to be since I was in 5th grade, I was in collapse. And I was probably also in collapse because I'd been in fight flight for 15 years. But you don't necessarily have to live in a chronic state of one to get thrown into a chronic state of the other, right? But what I try to tell folks is I usually say it more crassly, but I'll use the PG version. We want a fat butt and we want a fat window of tolerance. Okay? You want a thick booty and you want a thick window of tolerance. And that's why you want it to be able to be flexible, right? Because if your window is this wide, let's say it's 2 feet wide and your window above it's 6 inches and your window below it's 6 inches, you're mostly activated in the window, right? But if your window of tolerance is 2 inches wide and the other 2 windows are feet, you're in and out and in and out and in and out like you're on a crazy, scary roller coaster. And you want to be on a fabulously chill kiddie ride. Okay. You're going to go up, you're going to come back down. You're going to go up and come back down. So that's some ways you might start to understand it for yourself. But I also want you guys to know, you don't have to know any theory, rhetoric, dialogue, any of the doctrine. It's about the feelings in the body. So when you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, like I've seen Angel nodding her head. Yeah. Oh, I know that feeling. I know that feeling. That's the first step. I know the feeling. Oh, I can sense that sensation. Oh, I get it now. I feel that too. That means this might be happening.
Yeah. When you're talking about the car example and, a car pulling out in front of you, back in my life, back in Canada, I was in fight or flight all the time with my 24-hour job. And I remember every morning did feel like a brace. Every morning was like, all right, how are you going to do this day? That was always the thought, like, how will you survive this day? And then, every time my phone went off, it was like a whole jolt to my body, to the point where, I'm now 9-10 months in my quieter life. But there are certain levels of volume on the ringtone where when I hear them, it takes me right back to, it's wild. The body remembers. Anyway, okay, beautiful, important work. Thank you for the work that you do. Let's talk a little bit about mushrooms because for sure everybody's going to be interested in them. What I love that I'm hearing is because they're becoming very hot, very popular. But it's really nice to have some support. Really nice. Yeah. So what does that look like to support someone through a microdosing period?
Yeah, for sure. And I love a DIY too, but I knew better than to think I could DIY my psychedelic journey. So when I support somebody through a microdosing container, what it often looks like first is we set the intention together and we use the somatic intention setting model, which was a model taught by a teacher of mine, Adira Tan, who is deep in this work. And her primary focus is ayahuasca, but it deeply works for any psychedelic entheogen. And so what that looks like is, sure, we may jot down what our intention is, but we ask the body, okay? Then we start to look at what type of a protocol would be most supportive for her, because I do work with female-bodied people only. And so I created a method for microdosing called the cyclical microdosing method, which is, from my research, the only one born for female bodies based on female hormones. And so if the person I'm working with has a menstrual cycle, we would likely work with a cyclical microdosing method. If there's someone who is spiritual and witchy, which is every one of them, we often work with the moon. Okay. And so what it looks like is it's a protocol where for a few weeks you would dose 2 to 3 times, and for the next few weeks you would dose up to 5 times. If you've got a cycle, it would look like when you're in your follicular and ovulation phase, the 2 weeks after your bleed, you're dosing 2 to 3 times a week. And then when your cycle turns to luteal, when you're feeling your symptoms start to rise or you're feeling yourself go more inward, you would dose up to 5 times a week through your bleed. And then, of course, the inference is if you've not have a cycle anymore, you could work with the moon, and it would be from new to full is your follicular phase, from full to new is the luteal phase. So that's one option. And we may look at a different option. It might be simply dose 3 times a week. And we create this protocol. And the protocol is a schedule of dosing for a certain amount of days, for a certain number of weeks, and then afterwards you take the break. And so what's important is, unlike the Western medical model of take this pill to feel better, psychedelic medicine is not something you do daily. It is not something you do to fix yourself, and it's not something you do for life. I have not dosed on a protocol in years because of the massive amounts of transformation that I experienced in 3 incredibly potent microdosing protocols. Yeah. And so when I work with clients, they will start their protocol, and then every few weeks, it's usually every 2 weeks, I see them in a microdose assisted session. And so it's on Zoom. They would ingest their medicine about 30 minutes beforehand, and then we would come together. And we would usually talk a little bit at first and then go straight into some type of a breathwork visualization where we allow the subconscious parts to come online. And this is where I really love ritual as a way to assist us, because it speaks deeply to our younger self. It speaks deeply to the subconscious parts, which are opened even more widely by the additional relationship with plant medicine. And we worked together for 3 months. And through that time, often, this is pretty typical, we would see what's in the womb. She always likes to speak. We would probably see what's happening on your masculine versus your feminine side. We would see how your nervous system is responding in your everyday life. And overall, again, it's really about building women who are embodied. And by that, I mean, are you walking the talk?
Yeah.
And do you feel supported in that?
I mean, that's sort of like a question that I feel pulled to whenever I hear plant medicine. We humans tend to have a draw towards things that will take the work out of it, quick fixes, all that sort of thing. Do you find that that's people's initial pull to the medicine?
Not my people.
Like,
but I will say, and I don't know how or why I was thinking about this morning, but I see that pull in people who want to do big journeys.
Right.
And I'll be real honest. I see that. I live an hour north of Austin, Texas. In that state, that place in our state is known for spiritual bypass through psychedelic medicine. And so, yes, I think it is definitely an issue. And for the most part, the folks who, and I can weed it out. I have weeded it out and refused to work with some folks, but it's like you said, we want to feel better. We have this inner longing to be part of something more and know that we are that more, right? And even if you can't have that language around that inner knowing and that inner longing, psychedelic medicine, as you said, it's becoming more and more popular. And I think depending on what side of the internet you're on, it can be misconstrued as a hack, especially because of the bros who love to talk about it on podcasts. And so Joe Rogan, he loves to talk about the bro hacks of biohacking with your psychedelics. And that was what Silicon Valley was doing, right? And so for me, as someone who is a witch, who is deeply of the womb, who is deeply in tune with earth, it's about how do we build relationship with these medicines and ask them as the sentient beings that they are to assist us on our journey. I'm not taking them. I'm not using them. I'm working with them and asking them to build an allyship, a partnership with me, and giving back in reciprocity whenever I can as well. And I think that when folks understand that, it really does become this relationship where they show you what it is you're meant to see. They hold you as you are shown it. And then they assist you as you continue to integrate. And that's at least the way that I see it and try to work with them.
That's a beautiful arc. And it's really, it's really honoring and treating it as sacred as the feminine does.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, well, love what you're doing, especially for like, I just feel like you're doing it for my people. How can people specifically, explicitly work with you these days?
Yeah. So right now, my big focus is on Sacred Reset. It's a 10-day nervous system intervention for exactly the woman we've been talking to, the one who wants to actually feel like she's living the right life. It does not involve psychedelics. It is a very intimate container where we've got a one-on-one call and then 10 days of voice and text support. And what I've noticed is it's helping you stabilize in your actual life. Instead of waiting for me to see you every 2 weeks, it's a intensive accelerator for nervous system stabilization to assist you in learning direct, unique, individualized tools so that then once you get to the stabilization, you're ready for expansion. And Sacred Expansion is the name of my 3-month psychedelic microdosing container. And Sacred Reset is something that I'm just really excited about. That shift is a foundational part of it, but the reset protocol, the reset framework, I guess I should call it, is part of it too. And we've actually already teased a lot of it, right? The returning to the body, the embodying, the feelings, the softening, the expansion. And then really at the end, it's the return to truth, to self-truth and self-trust.
And there's just so much to be said. I love the format that you just told me. 10-day one-on-one call, then 10 days of voice note support. Because there's so much in that day-to-day. You know, like there are so many, you can get information all over the place, but that day-to-day, having someone to talk out what, like even trying to name sensations, help you reflect, like that, there's some real magic in that kind of support. I think that's really cool. Love it.
And I think you're so right too, because the thing that I've seen that's been most helpful, and especially because high functioning ladies who have anxiety often get stuck in a weird spiral around journaling. You either really can journal well or you avoid it like the plague. And so I just ask them to voice note me 3 times a day after they check in with their body. And it's the speaking it kind of just bypasses their ability to think, oh, did I say that right? Let me check my grammar. Am I going to have to turn this into my teacher for a grade? Right? Which is all things that I have thought. And it's the talking to self, because then what I see them doing afterwards is reaching out, because you get another session with me in the next month to just wrap things up. I'm talking to myself so much more. My voice notes are so full. I don't even feel like I have to go back and listen to them, but I'm able to process and slow real life down by the talking back and forth to just myself. And I did it this weekend after a tough conversation with a friend in my own voice notes. I'm like, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this. 5 hours later, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this. Next day, okay, I'm feeling good, right? So it's so interesting.
I know. God bless voice notes, okay? I'm on the other side of the world, and voice notes have become like bread and butter because time changes, time zones. When are we going to connect? So we just voice note, and it's the best.
Yeah.
Someone said to me, they're like, do you miss, like having a lot of female friendships? And I was like, I feel quite supported, like through voice notes alone, at least for now. And the few people that I've met, that support goes a long way. Like you said, being able to kind of think out loud.
Yeah, think out loud, for sure.
Okay, amazing. Well, before we wrap up, I would just love to give space if there's any last message you'd like to share, anything on your heart for this community.
Let's see. I think what I want to just reflect back on is something that we've already sort of talked about and hit on. It's this idea that high functioning women will wait as long as they possibly can to get help, because maybe life doesn't feel that bad. Things don't have to be falling apart for you to want support, because let's be honest, you're supporting everybody else. You're holding space for everybody else. Are you holding space for you? And oftentimes we feel like we don't need it because nothing is that bad. That was certainly my like niggling, like gnawing thought that was in my brain. It's like, well, it's not that bad. And the
Mhm.
other side of that same coin is, well, life looks good on paper. Why am I not as happy as I should be? Well, then clearly that's my problem. I'm the problem.
Mm.
And so what I want you to hear is that you probably are a little bit of the problem, and the best news is that you're also the solution. And it won't take you very long to figure out how to get there.
Heck yeah. We're all about radical ownership over here. And yeah, I mean, it's like, yes, you are the problem, but that sounds so blamey. We're just really meaning to say, isn't that exciting? That means, that means
Yeah.
this will be the solution. Yeah.
Not only that, it's like you have every single answer you need. And I don't see myself as somebody's guru. I certainly don't know everything. I like to see myself as the lighthouse, where I'm like, you pass me as you're going through the dark.
Mm,
You either come this way or you keep going in whatever way. I'm not going to judge. I'm here to show you a way that has worked profoundly for myself. And I'm just a little ahead of you, right? Ready to show you how to get there too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a way shower. Thank you for sharing all this with us today. And it was so great to get to know you.
Same to get to know you. I just love the show. I love your energy, and I just think that you're doing great work too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, Spirit Club, you heard it here. You know what to do.